Free agency has started, and it looks like the Chicago White Sox will be officially saying goodbye to José Abreu very soon. Will the payroll be similar to last year, or will Jerry decide to slash things and operate like a small market team? And if the trade market is the most realistic avenue for the White Sox to improve in 2023, could Lucas Giolito really be dealt?
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's been an amazing White Sox career, and it was not supposed to end this way, but José Abreu is most likely saying goodbye. If the White Sox are in the business of trading players to try and get better, what core players could be gone? And despite the temptation of hope, don't expect Jerry Reinsdorf to spend big this offseason. Free agency has begun. Due to several factors, I'm sure. Don't expect the White Sox to be active this offseason. The Sox have made some moves over the last few years in the month of November. Go back last year on November 30th, two moves. Lurie Garcia was signed for 3 years, $16.5 million. And Kendall Graveman on the same day, 3 years, $24 million. Go back a couple years, November 22nd, 2019, Abreu signed that 3-year, $50 million contract that is now coming to a close. And Yasmani Grandal on November 21st, 2019, signed that big 4-year, $74 million contract, richest in White Sox history. So where are these big free agents going to land? We've talked about Aaron Judge quite a bit, as everybody's wondering where he's going to go. Jim Bowden had an article in The Athletic. I don't know if you saw this. Maybe you did. Had a good laugh about it. It was entitled Aaron Judge Free Agency Sweepstakes, ranking the 5 teams most likely to sign him. Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, Giants, and White Sox. Bowden put White Sox in the 5th spot. Wow, this is what he had to say from the article. I will never count out Reinsdorf for making a big splash with any of his teams at any time. The White Sox are expected to let first baseman José Abreu walk in free agency and plan to move Andrew Vaughn to first base and open the designated hitter spot at least part of the time for Eloy Jimenez. They do have top prospect Oscar Colas, who profiles as their future right fielder on the way, but he could move to left field to make room for Judge. The White Sox will need to improve their defense and replace Abreu's offense, and they could use Judge's leadership by example and work ethic in their clubhouse. In 1996, 26 years ago, Reinsdorf made perhaps his biggest free agent splash when he signed Albert Bell to what was then the richest contract in baseball history, a 5-year, $55 million deal. Can history repeat itself and the White Sox shock the baseball world by inking Judge? I doubt it. And there are hints they won't be in on top free agents, but I would never bet against the White Sox owner if he decides he wants to go down this lane. Bowden's link in the article to the hints that the White Sox will not be in on top free agents takes you to an article by the Athletic's James Fegan. And Fegan's article was entitled, "The White Sox Will Try to Engineer an Immediate Turnaround Without Big Additions Expected." So over the last few days, we have heard the White Sox will have a comparable payroll to 2022, and other reports have said that Jerry will slash payroll. Now, this is what Fegan had said in his article. The current Fangraphs estimate for the 2023 Sox payroll is $173 million. And while that could be knocked down a few million by some non-tenders and is an imperfect replication of the team's internal numbers, it would make top-level free agent signings unlikely and be a consideration in what sorts of trades they can execute. If there's one thing the White Sox are not touting about themselves this offseason, it's their payroll flexibility. And here is Rick Hahn from that article, quote, "We're in the position we placed ourselves in contractually with some of our commitments. We made these commitments because we believe in the talent we committed to, and part of the goals for next year is to get some of the guys who underperform to get back to accustomed levels. Big part of our improvement will come from that area, we hope." I don't think there's anyone in the room who's pounding the table for let's stand pat, run it back with these guys. Even last year, opening day, when we were projected to win the division and some people projected us to go deeper than that, we knew there were areas we could solidify and get better. We certainly believe that things evening out will be in our favor next year in terms of guys getting closer to their traditional levels of health and playing and performance, but we still know we've got work to do, end quote. Does that give you a lot of comfort and confidence? It doesn't for me. The White Sox are still very much in this competitive window. Impressive talent, but are missing some key pieces. There has not been a big splash move by the White Sox, $100 million plus contract on an impactful player since they started to tear things down almost 6 years ago. This is why White Sox fans are so desperate to see new ownership. Since the fall of 2016, the White Sox have won 2 playoff games and 1 division title. I'm going to tell you why the signs point to the Sox taking steps backwards. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all on betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're also the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Mark Feinsand of MLB.com had an article out, read through that, as I'm sure you might have seen this. Best trade chip for every MLB team. Went right to the White Sox, and Feinsand highlighted Lucas Giolito. And this is what he wrote in that article on Lucas Giolito and why that would be a good situation. It's quite possible that the White Sox try to extend Giolito, who earned $7.45 million in 2022 and is entering his final year of arbitration before becoming a free agent next winter. The right-hander had a subpar season by his standards, but his track record since 2017 would be more than enough for a team to roll the dice on him for one season. I've heard that quite a bit. I've heard, Lucas Giolito talked about. I don't see that happening. Anything's possible, right? I don't see that happening. Hendricks, if they're trading somebody, maybe Liam Hendricks, it would free up a ton of money if the Sox are interested in big league for big league club type trades. Honestly, though, look, I can't believe we're having these types of conversations. This was not part of the plan. 1 division title, 2 playoff wins, and we're now talking about taking drastic steps backwards, trading from the core and our pitching staff, our starting staff. So just let me get this straight. And I'm sure you've had these conversations with yourself, other Sox fans. After an exhaustive managerial search, the White Sox bring in a first-time manager from the Kansas City Royals organization to hopefully help players learn or relearn the language of analytics while also recorrecting all of the other wrongs that have occurred over the last few years, like hustle, passion. Grifol will be without one of the most prolific hitters in recent Sox history, José Abreu, and should not expect the payroll to increase despite the fact that there are several critical holes to fill on a team that, again, is in their competitive window and plays baseball in a major market. This is from Rick Hahn recently. Quote, "We're in the position we placed ourselves in contractually with some of our commitments." End quote. Yeah, Rick Hahn was able to tear things down and sell off assets, stockpile talent, so to speak. So what he did with that money, it just didn't go well. The stuff that was supposed to be earmarked maybe for Manny Machado or Bryce Harper, that's coming now back to haunt the organization. Shopping in the dollar bin might save you initially, but it will bring you back to the bin that much sooner. Again, I repeat, since 2016, 1 division title, 2 playoff wins. José Abreu is a White Sox legend. I'm going to tell you why his career on the South Side should never be forgotten. More on that in a moment. With free agency starting, and if all the speculation is true, José Abreu will be wearing a different uniform in 2023. It will absolutely sting if it's with the Cubs and he helps them turn things around, especially if they spend money the way they can this offseason. No matter where José Abreu goes, it will hurt. Maybe you feel this way too. I've been saying goodbye to Abreu for it feels like the last 2 months. I've been working through the stages of grieving, and I think I'm on acceptance. But the moment he signs with a different team, I'll probably shoot back to anger, and we'll have to work my way through all of the steps all over again. José Abreu was in a different class. He wore the White Sox uniform well, and our experience as fans was better for having him in the organization. No question about that. He was a mentor, a leader, and a captain. He took over for Paul Konerko, which was no small undertaking. I was there for José Abreu's first game in a White Sox uniform, March 31st, 2014. The weather was as you'd expected, but José Abreu did not disappoint. Classic Abreu. He hit a double and went 2 for 4 with an RBI. You just knew he was going to be something special, and he truly was. So many wonderful memories followed over the years. So many awards racked up. Rookie of the Year in 2014, several Silver Slugger awards, MVP in 2020. He was an Iron Man for the Chicago White Sox during a time when injuries were rampant. He wanted to be a member of the White Sox. He was ready to sign himself years ago. This was his home, and it should have ended a different way. But Abreu did his part. He did everything he could to bring a championship to the South Side. He is a White Sox legend, and he will have his number 79 retired. And if there's any justice, there will be a statue out on the concourse for future fans to recognize his greatness. I'm trying not to be sad that it's likely over, trying to be grateful that I got to witness José Abreu firsthand and can tell my son about his greatness. Thank you, José Abreu. And thank you, folks, very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll continue to examine off-season White Sox scenarios. Maybe the Sox surprise us over the weekend and make a big splash. I doubt it, but I'm trying to stay hopeful. They spend a little bit of money to shore up some of those holes as this era of Pedro Grifol goes full steam ahead. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.